Well, good evening. So I'll know what kind of crowd I got. How many of you happy to be here? All right. How many of you unhappy to be here? Oh, I'm glad you got it down. I was wondering that. You did have one unhappy to be? Okay. All right. All right, take your Bible out and turn to the book of Proverbs, and I think we're going to be in I know we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 24. We're going to look at verses 1 through 34, and instead of reading through the whole chapter, we're going to kind of continue like we've been going and just read through a verse at a time as we see what difference that makes. Knowing what Proverbs mean. Some proverbs, you can read a proverb and you know exactly what it's talking about. Sometimes you look at a proverb and it doesn't exactly resonate in your mind what the main truth of that was, and you have to work on it a little bit to understand it. But knowing what the proverbs mean and how to apply them to yourself. Now this is real important, how to apply them to yourself and to the community that you live in will cause you to prosper if you live according to what you've learned in the Proverbs, and it will also cause the others who are around you, if they're living according to their Proverbs, to prosper as well. Now, when I say prosper, I don't always mean financially, but oftentimes I mean financially, but you always prosper in the kingdom of God in some kind of way by following God and doing what it is He wants you to say. While many of the wise sayings in Proverbs have to do with you and me as individuals, many of them also have to do with us as a society and how we get along with one another together. Now tonight what we're going to look at some of these wise sayings and how that relates to ourselves and to society as a whole. So looking at your Bible right there, go ahead and look at Proverbs chapter 24 and let's look at verses 1 and 2. It says, be not envious of evil men, nor desire to be with them. Now, you can underline that, nor desire to be with them. For their hearts devise violence, and their lips talk of trouble. And all God's people said. Now, one of the things we want to be able to discern and pull from that proverb, first off, we know that we shouldn't have anything to do with evil. We need to stay away from evil. But as mamas and daddies, there's one thing that you're always worried about your kids when they leave home and they're not with you. Do y'all ever worry about who your kids are hanging out with? Now, why do you worry about who your kids are hanging out with? Because they're liable to do the things that those kids are doing. I think one of the things we got to keep, and this has to do a lot with evil when it comes into that. I wrote this down. I said a person's peers have a great influence over their lives. I'm going to test the mamas and daddies here and just how many mamas and daddies in here believe that through the years the peers have often had more influence over your kids than you did, all right? So that's one of the reasons we have to make sure, even as adults, we need to make sure the people that we hang around. Now, we're always going to be going into places where there's evil, and we're going to interact with evil, but that doesn't mean we camp out and we stay there with it. We go in, we deliver the gospel, we turn around and come back out. So we need to make sure that we're going to be around people who are not going to promote evil things. We're going to be around people who are going to promote those things which are good for us. The second one I wanted to look at is going to be verses 3 and 4. So look at 3 and 4 right there. By wisdom, a house is built, and by understanding it is established. But by knowledge, the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. And all God's people said. Now, a person of wisdom is going to acquire riches. Now, why does a person of wisdom acquire riches? Not witches, but riches. Y'all are laughing because you're not standing in front of 80 people trying to say that either. Okay, why does a wise person seem to prosper? Because he's prudent in the things that he does. He's because he or she is wise. They can see things that other people cannot see, and they use their wisdom to their own personal advantage and to the advantage of those that they come in contact with. So the more wisdom that we can have, not the more knowledge. Knowledge is a good thing, but wisdom is how to apply that knowledge you've got in there. The more that you got in there, the more you know not to do the stupid mistakes. The more you know how to do the right thing in the right situation. So it's going to cause you to prosper in the long run. When we start looking at verses 5 and 7, this is what we read. A wise man is full of strength, and a man of knowledge enhances his might. For by wise guidance you can wage your war, and in an abundance of counselors there is victory. Wisdom is too high for a fool. In the gate, he does not open his mouth. And one of the things that we can discern from that, not only with wisdom do we prosper, but with wisdom we also have greater strength. Now, through the years, when you work around the house and that kind of stuff, y'all ever get in a situation in the house where there needs to be two people doing the job that you're doing it, but there's only one there to do it? Right? So you got two choices. You can either bust your gut and reach down and pick up something that you shouldn't pick up, or you can step back for just a minute and you can look at that thing and you can figure out a way to move that. I remember one day, I think it was a piano that we had in the church. I'd only been here about 6 months or so, and Brother Ken Dunbar was here every single day of the first 15 years I was here, he was at the church every single day that we were here. And I went outside and coming down one of the hallways down there, he had a piano moving down the middle of the hallway. And I ran over there and I thought to myself, Brother Ken, what in the world are you doing moving a big giant piano? And then I looked, and he had gone and he had cut these little dowels that were about this big right here, and they were about this long. They were just about 1.5 inches longer than what the piano was from side to side. And he'd push it a little ways till it got to the next one. He'd go ring that dowel and put it in there, and he was just moving that piano all by himself, getting it right where it needed to go. But that's an illustration of strength that is produced by wisdom. So when we sit back and we analyze things, we figure out, well, if I got to come along at the house, maybe I can do this thing by myself as opposed to trying to pick it up and move it with my back. So in wisdom, when you got many counselors that know what they're talking about, you're going into battle, there's a good chance you're going to win the battle, because wisdom is even better than strength is, because with wisdom, there's a new strength that's even better than that. Then we get down to verses 8 and 9. Verse 8 and 9 says, whoever plans to do evil will be called a schemer. The devising of folly is sin, and the scoffer is an abomination to mankind. Now, what I pulled out of that when I was thinking was, planning to do evil is an abomination to the Lord. And we in the church all know that we can't plan to do evil. But let me just ask you a personal question, and don't raise your hand here. Does everybody understand that? Don't raise your hand here. You can raise it silently in your mind if you want to. But have you ever planned to do evil to somebody else? Unfortunately, I'm going to have to tell you, as a pastor, I have planned to do evil things to people, especially in my younger days. I might have been what they call passive aggressive. Y'all know what passive aggressive is? That's those people that just smile at you and just agree with everything that you do, and then they go on, and after they leave, they come back and they find a way that they get even with you, and they try and don't even want you to know who it was that got them. Well, that's planning to do evil, and do you believe that sometimes Christian people will do that? And the truth is that they will. Planning to do evil is an abomination to God. God is not pleased with that, and he's going to take retribution on the person who does those kind of things. We can't do that. The one verse of Scripture from the New Testament that always comes to my mind right now, whenever I have the least little bit of thought, I'd like to slap, and when I have that thought, the thing that comes to my mind is what it says when it says, vengeance is mine. And who said that? Saith the Lord. Okay, he's the one who levels the thing out, and he does that over time. That's not our job, that's his. So to plan to do evil to someone is an abomination to the Lord. Okay, let's look at verses 10 through 12. Verse 10 through 12. If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. Rescue those who are being taken away to death. Hold back those who are stumbling to the slaughter. If you say, behold, we did not know this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? In other words, doesn't God really know that you really did know and you really did see something? Does not he who keeps watch over your soul know it? And will he not repay man according to his works? In other words, we're going to get what we deserve apart from the grace of God in the end on that. Now, people are personally responsible for protecting others from evil. Cain asked the question, am I my brother's keeper? And what's the answer to that question? Yes, it is. If we're driving down the road and we're going down Highway 63 over here and we're zooming down 70 miles an hour and we're in a hurry and there just happens to be a rake, a garden rake laying in the middle of the road with all the little forks sticking up on that thing, what should we do? Now, why in the world would we do that? It's the right thing to do, keep somebody else from getting hurt. Well, you think in your mind, well, the worst thing's going to happen is somebody's going to run over that and get a flat tire. But then again, maybe that's not the worst thing that could happen. Maybe they could run over that thing, get a flat tire, have a blowout, cross the median, run into somebody and get killed. And then the Lord, you read about it in the newspaper 3 days later and you think, well, I should have stopped and picked that thing up on the way down there, but I didn't do it. Well, God knows the heart. God knows whether really and truly whether the world would have come to an end if you hadn't got there on time when you were going. So really and truly, I'm responsible for taking care of you, but not only are you responsible for taking care of me and make sure that I don't make dumb mistakes, you're responsible for making sure that I don't make dumb mistakes too. Because how many of you in here have ever made a dumb mistake? Okay, 6 people in here have made a dumb mistake. This is the smartest people I've ever preached to in my life, you know. Okay. Proverbs 13 and 14. 13 and 14 says, my son, eat honey, for it's good, and the drippings of a honeycomb are sweet to your taste. Know that wisdom is such to your soul. If you find it, there will be a fortune, and your hope will not be cut off. Now, the way I transposed this and wrote it in a language I can understand is those who crave wisdom like honey. Now, I'm assuming that everybody's like me. I love sweet stuff. If it's sweet, I like it. That's just the bottom line. But those who crave wisdom like honey will find their purpose in life. I can't believe I'm going to admit this, but I'm going to go ahead and admit this. I hope there's nobody from the kitchen in here tonight. I see a few in here, but I ate 2 desserts tonight. Before everybody got here, there was a pile of cookies. And I looked at those cookies, and they looked soft and mushy. And I bit into that cookie, and you know what? It was soft and mushy. And I gobbled it, and one of the little kids came by about a minute. He said, you're not supposed to be eating those yet. So then I sat down, and Tynell loves me so much that I didn't bring a dessert. She brought me a piece of cake, set it down right there beside me. So I should have looked at her and said, baby, I've already had my sweets, and in fact, you're sweet enough, I should never have to eat a sweet. You know, I should have said something like that, but I didn't. I gobbled that sweet down. And I went and took my tray over there and dumped it out, and I went back and I passed where the cookies were. Hush. You must have seen me. I grabbed that other cookie, stuck it in my pocket, and come over here and eat it where nobody's seen. But you know, I just crave sweets. I just crave honey. But if we craved wisdom with that same kind of craving, every time we passed an opportunity to obtain wisdom, we'd reach out and grab it. And we'd pull that wisdom in and use that in our lives so that we could be productive as we live our lives. Verses, what? 15 and 16? Okay, verses 15 and 16. Lie not in wait as a wicked man against the dwelling of the righteous. Do no violence in his home. For the righteous falls 7 times and rises again, but the wicked stumble in times of calamity. And when I rewrote that in my brain to be able to process it, I came up with this. Those who walk in the paths of righteousness. And by the way, as Christians, that's what our job is to walk in the paths of righteousness. But sometimes, even when we walk in the paths of righteousness, we still fall and we still mess up. So those who walk in the paths of righteousness may fall down, but by God's grace, they always get up again, and they always continue until the day that God calls them home. So, you know, just hang in there and keep doing what you're supposed to do, and don't try to get even with people and that kind of thing on the way. Number 8, or verses 17 through 20, it says, do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and let not your heart be glad when they stumble, lest the Lord see it and be displeased and turn away his anger from him. Fret not yourselves because of evildoers, and be not envious of the wicked, For the evil man has no future, the lamp of the wicked will be put out. You know good and well that sometimes people steal stuff and they get away with it. Or somebody does something that they shouldn't do and they get a reward that they shouldn't have got. Or they get paid more than they should have got paid for something and it just wasn't right. And you see that and then you witness that they've done some kind of an evil thing, and at the same time it seems like they're getting away with it scot-free. So in your own mind, you might think sometimes, well, I wish they would just get what they do deserve. Well, God's not okay with that. Two flip sides on this thing is Proverbs 17 and 18 is don't fret when evil prospers. Number one, don't fret because God's going to level the score out. Either it's going to be leveled here on earth or it's going to be leveled in eternity. So you don't fret when you see them prosper, even when they do the wrong thing. But don't gloat when evil is destroyed either. Don't do your happy dance because the evil got torn up and something terrible befell somebody else. And sometimes we feel that way doing that kind of thing. The ninth saying I think we can put together with verses 23 through 26. These also were sayings of the wise. Partiality in judging is not good. Whoever says to the wicked, you're right, will be cursed by peoples, abhorred by nations, but those who rebuke the wicked will have delight, and a good blessing will come on them. Whoever gives an honest answer kisses the lips. So in other words, it's a good thing. Never be partial in judgment. If you get in a situation where you've got extra power and you've been given the right to be the one who makes the decision, you can't favor your children. You can't favor other people. You can't lessen the reward because it's your children. You can't lessen the reward because you want to give somebody else a greater reward over here. When it comes down to it and the person's done what they're supposed to do, whatever's just and right, is the judge. It's your responsibility that you make sure you execute the righteous thing in the way that it needs to be done. And sometimes that's a tough thing to know, but that's what happens when God puts us in positions where we have to judge what the right thing to do is. So never be partial in any situation and always try to make it work out the way God will be pleased with. Verse 27, prepare your work outside, get everything ready for yourself in the field, and after that, build your house. Now, most of you didn't build your own house. A couple of you probably may have built your own house. Most people don't. So our days are a little different than they were. But I think what this proverb is actually telling us is there is an order and a way that we list these priorities. You know, if you're going to build a house, most likely you can't build a house in a day's time. You're going to have to build that house over a long period of time. So if you were dealing in this day and you're going to have to build some mud bricks or whatever to build that house, if you just dive in and start building the house after 2 or 3 days, you're going to get hungry. And when you get hungry, there's not going to be anything to eat. So you got to make a list of priorities. You got to say to yourself, well, you know, if I'm going to build this house, I need to make sure I got the material here. I need to make sure not only do I have the material here, I need to make sure I got food to eat. So I got to go out here and grow me some crops in the field so that I got them coming in. So I may have to live in a tent for a little while until I can get this thing to work out. I think God intends for us to have wisdom so that we can look back and we can break the task that He lays before us out. But then as we break those tasks out, we can't just do them in whatever order we want to. We got to kind of sign a priority list to this. Well, this one's got to be done before this one, and sometimes that gets to be really complicated. But a man of wisdom, a woman of wisdom will lay out those tasks, look up before God and say, God, I know there's an order that I got to do these things in. Would you give me the wisdom and show me which one of these things needs to come in what order so that it can get accomplished when it needs to be accomplished? And then I guess verses 28 and 29. Be not witnesses against your neighbor without cause, and do not deceive with your lips. Do not say, I will do to him as he has done to me, and I will pay the man back for what he's done to me. So the situation I picture right here is a guy who goes to work one day, and his neighbor that works with him in the cubicle next to him at Ingalls Shipbuilding or where, Huntington Ingalls. No, what's the name of the place now? Huntington Eagles, goes in there now, and the guy next to him, the boss, comes in and he tells a lie on the person who's in there next to him. And the person in there next to him finds out later on that he's told to lie on him, and this guy got in trouble, but the other guy got away with it scot-free. So later on, the boss comes back in and asks the guy who got in trouble and was lied on something about his neighbor. Now he's got to make a decision. Am I going to tell the truth here, or am I going to get even with them and take a shot at them when they're not looking? So he who has wisdom and he who wants to live in a society where everything works the way it's supposed to, what do? They do the right thing and they tell the truth. Now, these real life situations we get ourselves into from time to time, that's what I love about the book of Proverbs. It's so real, and it's right there. And then finishing up with verses 30 through 34, I passed by the field of a sluggard, by the vineyard of a man lacking sense, and behold, it was overgrown with thorns, and the ground was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. Then I saw and considered it, and I looked and I received instructions. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a robber, and want like an armed man. Now, I misinterpreted this parable probably the first 40 years of my life as I read the parable. Because I saw this parable is, man needs to work. He needs to be able to get things accomplished, and he doesn't need to let his grass grow up around his house, and he needs to take care of the fence, he needs to keep everything fixed, and a little sleep, a little slumber, a little fold in the hands before too long, he's going to come close. But I really missed the point of the parable, because this is the point of the parable is, be smart enough to watch your neighbor's house, and watch your neighbor not take care of his house, and have a little too much sleep, and a little bit too much slumber, and it is him that gets caught in the situation. The wise person doesn't just learn from their mistakes. They learn from watching the other people in the community in which they're with so that they learn from that. Now, by the way, those of you who are the youngest child in your family, how many of y'all are the youngest sibling? Okay, aren't we smarter than all the other ones? Now, every mama and daddy will tell you that the last one was the best. The reason the last one is the best is because, well, they hit perfection. And then once you hit perfection, you just stop. But now the reason the last child is always smarter than the other ones is because they've learned by all the mistakes that the older children made. And all the younger people said, amen. That's right. See, we learn. Watch. So that's how. I'm going to have some arguments at home tonight, I can tell already. But that's what wisdom does for you. It keeps you from actually having to experience failure sometimes because somebody else you've been watching, your neighbor's house, you watched it and you saw how they didn't take care of the house and how after a few years it rotted down because they didn't fix the roof or they didn't do what they did over here. So you know that when that stuff happens, you got to go and take care of it because you've seen what happens right down the road. Having wisdom to know what to do in a given situation. Wisdom not only leads to personal prosperity, it also leads to a healthy community when everybody in the community lives by the wisdom that's contained in the book of Proverbs. I get various trade magazines, even in Christianity we have trade magazines we look at. And one of the trade magazines that I got this week came in and it's got Dr. Ben Carson on there. Y'all know who Dr. Ben Carson is? He ran for the presidency, but he's also one of the top 5 or 6 surgeons in the world in the field that he's in. Do what now? Now he's over the urban housing thing. Well, they interviewed him, and they wanted to know what his secret to success was. And the very thing that he said in that magazine about the secret of success, he attributed everything he had and the ability he had to what God had done in his life. And then they asked him, well, how did that play out in your life? He said, well, when I was about 14 years old, he talks about an incident that he had. He said he went home and he picked up the Bible and he began to read the book of Proverbs. And through the book of Proverbs, he learned to read the Proverbs every single day of his life. Throughout his whole life, he's tried to intake the book of Proverbs into his mind and his heart. He says, now, when I get ready to make policy decisions over the urban house thing right here, whatever decision I make has been filtered through the book of Proverbs. So he said people a lot of times don't like the decisions that I make, but they're all based on that information. Oh, if only all the administrators and everybody that we had in the United States filtered everything through the book of Proverbs, what would happen to our community of the United States of America? Be great stuff. Be good. All right. If you would, take your prayer sheet out in front of you.